Hello. So my purpose today will be to try to orient the Trojan War cycle within the larger context of Greek mythology, but maybe more importantly, to orient the Odyssey inside the Trojan War cycle, so that when you start reading the Odyssey, you have some idea of a similar context that a Greek reader or a Greek listener of the epic might have. The Trojan War epic fits into a larger story of Greek mythology, and you might be familiar with that. And maybe you've heard about the Titans or about Zeus and Hera and the stories of the Greek gods. So in this large literary universe, the Trojan War forms a small part. But it forms an important transitional moment. The gods are still active in the lives of people, and heroes, descendants of gods, children of gods, still exist in this world. And more or less, they cease to exist after the Trojan War. So the Trojan War epic comes very near the end of our story of Greek mythology as we transition fully over into really historical times, into the historical deeds of men. So to somebody who sat down to listen to the Odyssey or who sat down to read the Odyssey, this is coming at the end of a long story of stories about which they know. And it's coming at the end of the Trojan War cycle as well. And so I think what I might do right now is sort of orient you a little bit in terms of what that Trojan War cycle might have looked like. There aren't necessarily beginnings and endings to these stories because, of course, we can always say, well, who was his parent or who was her mother? And we can go back and we can be interested in those questions and we can trace our story backwards. But the Trojan War cycle does form a pretty neat, coherent saga, to steal the Norse word. And the Odyssey is going to begin in the middle of things, but it's going to begin in the middle of things with which you're already familiar. So I'll give you that familiarity now. I think the story of the Trojan War and the causes of that began about a generation before the war broke out with the marriage of a hero, Peleus, and a minor goddess, Thetis. And they have their wedding, and they very rationally invite all of the gods except for one. They don't invite the goddess Eris. And the reason for this is that she's the goddess of strife and of discord. And that's, there's certainly, if you've ever invited people to a wedding or ever been to a wedding, you can think, maybe that family member shouldn't have been invited. Well, obviously the goddess of discord is not somebody who needs to be invited to our wedding. Nevertheless, Eris is still able to sow her discord. From outside the wedding, she tosses a golden apple, and it is just dedicated to the most beautiful. Well, obviously there are many people who might, and many goddesses who might think that this is meant for them, but there are three major goddesses who think that this is meant for them. There's Hera, the queen of the gods. There's Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and there's Athena, the goddess of wisdom. And depending on which version of the story you hear, they decide that a young, beautiful Trojan prince, whose name is Paris, will choose to whom the apple should be given. And some stories say that they bribe him before, and some people say that they give him presents afterwards. But nevertheless, he chooses Aphrodite as the most beautiful of the goddesses, and his reward for choosing her is that she makes the most beautiful mortal woman on earth, whose name is Helen, fall in love with him. But Helen's already married. Helen's already married to the king of Sparta, whose name is Menelaus. And she's instantly in love with Paris, and Paris kidnaps her. She runs away with Paris. They go back to Troy. Menelaus is, I suppose, understandably upset and heartbroken. And his brother, Agamemnon, who's the most powerful of the Greek kings at this time, he raises a giant army and a giant navy to sail from Greece across the Aegean to Troy and to try to recover his brother's wife. And so all of the great Greek heroes who are alive at this time, all of the great Greek kings, they enlist. And then there's a number of stories about the difficulty of getting to Troy. And of course, on the one hand, one man's cheating wife doesn't necessarily seem the right reason for thousands of men to leave home and to fight a war. But the Greeks also really, most Greeks have no expectation of a particularly wonderful afterlife. And the afterlife that's offered to most Greeks is just the afterlife that comes with fame, with kleos, with having your name spoken with respect after you die. And war is the best way to receive this honor, this respect. And so any excuse for war is also an excuse to win honor. And these are the two greatest cultures of the Mediterranean at this time, the Greek culture and the Trojan culture. And so there are all sorts of attractions to going to war to prove yourself worthy. Once the Greeks get to Troy, Troy is a walled city, and the Trojans can fight them on the plains in front of the city that lead down to the beach, that lead to the ocean. And this is where most of the fighting takes place. And it's a stalemate for the first 9 years of the war. The Greeks are able to capture most of the towns around Troy, but the Trojans are able to hold off in their city, and the siege of the city is not able to starve the Trojans out. Most stories then of the Trojan War, and the stories with which you're familiar, pick up in the 10th year of the war. That's when Homer's other epic that survives, the Iliad, begins, in the 10th year of the war. And in the 10th year of the war, the greatest of the Greek heroes, whose name is Achilles, who's actually the son of Peleus and Thetis, whose wedding kicked this whole thing off, has become very angry with the brother kings of the Greeks, Agamemnon and Menelaus. They have taken from him a slave girl who he had fallen in love with, who he had captured from the Trojans, and he feels disrespected and dishonored. And so he refuses to fight. And once he refuses to fight, the balance, which has been evenly matched for the last 9 years, starts to shift in the direction of the Trojans. And we start to see the Trojans swing out. They're starting to push the Greeks back. And the Trojan heroes are being more and more successful. Achilles is still angry, and he refuses to fight. And the first word, actually, of the Iliad is Mainen, which means wrath or anger. That's the song of anger. So Achilles is refusing to fight, but his best friend, his lover, his boyfriend, his partner, is overcome by sympathy for the Greeks who are being slaughtered. And so he steals Achilles' armor, puts it on, and just using the armor and his own bravery is able to lead a pushback of the Trojans. And he successfully pushes back the Trojans and overcomes the lost ground. But he pushes too far. He's eventually killed by a Trojan hero. And then when this news comes back to Achilles again, his wrath comes forth, and he comes forward in a rageful, vengeful battle, and he ends up coming face to face with the greatest of the Trojan heroes, Hector, and he slaughters and kills Hector. But his anger is so great that he doesn't return Hector's body as would be customary, but instead he treats it very disrespectfully. But eventually, Hector's father, the king of Troy, Priam, comes down, and there's a very emotional scene where the father begs for his son's body, and Achilles ends up giving up his wrath, giving up the body, and but the war doesn't end. But that is where the Iliad ends. So the Iliad really is a story that takes place not in the middle of the war, but it doesn't take place at the beginning of the war, and it doesn't take place at the end of the war. Achilles epic tradition tells us that that Achilles will be killed before the war ends. And again, we know that the balance is now going to shift towards the Trojans. And so the story goes that Odysseus, another one of the Greek heroes, the most clever of the Greek heroes, comes up with an idea to trick the Trojans. They can't be defeated by force anymore, not without Achilles. If we couldn't win with Achilles, we definitely won't be able to win without Achilles. But he comes up with an idea to trick the Trojans by making them think that the Greeks have gone away and that they have left an offering of a great horse, that they will hide inside the horse. And then if the horse is brought inside the city gates, the Greek heroes can sneak out and slaughter the Trojans. This plan almost doesn't work, but works. And Odysseus and the other Greek heroes sneak out of the horse. And they kill the Trojans. They take over the city. They burn the city. And then they have to get back. And then there's a series of wonderful stories of how they get back to their homes. And the majority of them do not get back easily, and they do not get back happily. Agamemnon, for example, when he gets home, he finds that his wife, Clytemnestra, has fallen in love with a younger man, and that man kills him when he returns, and then it's up to Agamemnon's son to kill his father's murderer. And so from this one story, the Trojan War, 10 years, Greeks win in the end, there are all of these branches of the story that come off. And maybe you know a story like this. Maybe you know a story like, I don't know, the Marvel Universe, or where you can have many different authors telling different stories. Or maybe it's like The Wizard of Oz, where you have the standard story of Dorothy, but there are things that we can imagine happening before, and then we make a movie called Wicked, where there are things that we can imagine happening after. And different authors can add on. And it's important to have some understanding of the arc of the story. In a lot of cases, you need to know what happens after in order to understand the version what happens before, because it isn't exactly created chronologically. The narrative power of a prequel comes from knowing that those characters will develop into something else. 10 years passes after the end of the Trojan War. All of the heroes have come home, and all of their stories are done, except for Odysseus. And that's where the Odyssey begins. The Odyssey begins exactly 10 years, the Odyssey begins 10 years after the end of the Trojan War, and it begins with Odysseus being the one hero who has not returned home. He'll be the last hero to return home, and I can tell you he will return home. If you know that, if you know the cycle, you're now prepared to read the Odyssey. And you can see the way that I told you that story. That was me giving you an orally composed version of the story. And I added in a couple of things, and I added in the comparison with the Marvel Universe, or I added in the thinking about Wicked, or thinking about our own weddings, or something like that. That might be very much the way that Homer might have done when he was singing the Iliad or singing the Odyssey. It would be performed orally, and it could be a little bit different each time that it was composed. So that's also a little bit of an introduction. Now, as we go further into the books of the Odyssey, we'll be able to learn more details about the characters. But I think that's enough now for you to begin with an understanding. And of course, if Homer wanted you to have more details, he would give you more details. I think you have now a base level of understanding which is enough for the author to work his magic, starting with book 1. So I certainly hope you enjoy the beginning of the Odyssey.